Hello again, everybody. It's time to talk two-man game. We're talking hoops with my friend Matt Rocchio. I'm Bob Ramsey. Hope everybody is settled in after the first two games of the NBA Finals. And it's been interesting, Rock, and we want to thank Earl Austin Jr. for filling in for me. What a treat. Just a taste of what I get to work with every day in the winter for college basketball. He is the best.
Yeah, God, he really is the best. I've been getting people responding to that episode on Twitter like 2 weeks after the fact. So I mean, yeah, Earl's the absolute best. Can't wait to talk more basketball with him. But I mean, heck, we got quite a series here, Bruin Rammer. We actually finally called a game right, and I definitely know what's going to happen in Game 3. I'm definitely not confused after two games that went completely different opposite ways. Totally not
Yeah,
confused.
what did you see as, and were they so different? Trying to compare the contrasts are there. How does it change so dramatically, especially on the same court?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to zone it. I would say I think the biggest difference, and it's something we talked about, before the final started, which is the Warriors' ability to throw so many different types of looks at you. And they're not stubborn. They're very open-minded. They're going to throw different defensive looks at you. They're going to try different things on offense. And that was really the biggest thing that jumped out to me between game one and game two. They didn't really throw anywhere near the same coverages or looks at the Celtics that they did in game one. In game one, it was really crazy. They were playing completely different systems if Jayson Tatum was starting this possession or if Jayson Tatum was starting off ball. They were playing this hard umbrella when he was starting off ball with no one in the paint. But as soon as Tatum had the ball, it shifted to kind of like a zone box and one hybrid where everyone kind of boxed into the paint, and one guy was kind of sticking with Tatum, and that completely flummoxed him, turned him into a passer in game one. And then in game two, it was a little bit different where they said, listen, you're just naturally the way you are, we're going to have to send doubles, we're going to have to hedge guys, we're going to give you open looks, but you're still going to have to be the guy who beats us. We're not going to let you get 13 assists. And I actually think that worked. I actually think it was surprising that Golden State gave him so many possessions where they said, you're going to have to beat us one-on-one. And Jayson Tatum didn't take advantage of that. And I thought, honestly, the biggest problem in game two, despite his strong game, I think the biggest problem in game two was Jayson Tatum being a little bit too passive. And I mean, I honestly think that he should have had 35 in that game. There were too many possessions where they were able to get him one-on-one with, Bjelica for the Warriors, or even Otto Porter, or there was a bunch of times where they use that Smart or Derek White pick and roll to get him into a small ball pick and roll and get him Steph Curry one-on-one. And a lot of the possessions I'm talking about, he either went one-on-one and failed to beat the guy, usually pulling up for a jumper, or he immediately passed out when they showed the littlest bit of hedge. And I thought that was an interesting move by the Warriors. I think they took advantage of maybe Jayson hearing footsteps or seeing ghosts after that game one where he had to pass the ball so much, where they kind of showed him early pressure and then he was passing out of it early. But this time they weren't hedging as hard and they were recovering onto the shooters, and that's why you saw bad games from Al Horford. Not Marcus Smart, he had 17, but everyone else on that court, Grant Williams, those guys, they failed to augment Tatum in any way, shape, or form in game two because he was playing in the same mindset from game one, but the Warriors were one step quicker to the shooters than they were in game one. That was the big difference.
You mentioned Al Horford in game one. I thought after his big performance against Milwaukee that he'd be done and we wouldn't see another game like that. Now, he wasn't quite that good, but when you look at him statistically and demographically, his age, was that his one game of the series?
I mean, I definitely think that's viable. I mean, and honestly, it's not necessarily a shot on him. I really think what we're seeing. I think we're seeing a Celtics team that is a little bit worn down after a very tough season where they've been playing a tough brand of basketball. After a run in the playoffs that has been a little bit more grueling than what the Warriors have had to deal with their schedule. I think we're dealing with the Celtics teams that is a little bit older, a little bit more long in the tooth, and those older players, like Al Horford really being the main one, they're struggling right now to get through, to get through game 95 or whatever it is for some of these teams. And that's what I think we're seeing with Al Horford and partially he's going up against a very, springy lineup that has, they don't have they're not huge in Golden State, but, they're athletic. And, Kevon Looney's not an easy player for him to play against because Kevon Looney's kind of a younger version of him with no jumper. I mean, he's a little bit undersized, more of a 4 traditionally, but he plays a 5 in today's NBA, smaller, he's able to move on the perimeter, passer, those kind of things. Looney's given him, fits, and Draymond Green certainly doesn't make it easier in the possessions where he has to pick him up. So I just think this is a really bad matchup for Al Horford. It's one of those things where if he has a good stretch in games 5, 6, or 7, it could be something that completely flips it. But I just don't think we're going to see anything compared to what he did against Milwaukee.
He had his one.
Yeah.
I wanted to flip it a little bit. We were talking about what Golden State was doing defensively. One of the things that's been an unfortunate consistent, even when they won, and I became more aware of it because you called it out before the series began, that if the Celtics don't jump up on Curry on switches and when they come down, how many times did we see a guy sag back? I'm thinking of one time in particular. They go to the right wing, and I know what the player's thinking. I got to slide to help on the baseline drive. You've been taught that since he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But that's Steph Curry coming down the floor,
yeah,
setting up on the arc. And that momentary lapse, and I mean in the NBA, they're so great. That's all it takes to have that much of a lapse, and you're toast. And the Celtics can't afford that. Curry is the best ever when it comes to taking advantage of those mental mistakes. And I just don't know if the Celtics can overcome that.
And this is I'm glad you brought this up. This is a great back and forth in what we've seen so far because you're right. The minute they gave him the littlest bit of space in game 1, he was pulling up and he was hitting that shot. Game 2, Celtics a lot better at sticking close to him. But where was the difference and how did Steph Curry then take that and make it an advantage for him, and how did we see it play out on the court? It was really simple. They then attacked. I love that you brought up the baseline drive. They attacked the baseline in such an interesting way in game 2, which was they were constantly and consistently putting guys in the dunker spot because as soon as people slid to Curry, there would be an extra pass, then a pass to the dunker spot, and there would be an easy layup or an easy dunk to Kevon Looney, Draymond Green, Otto Porter. Those kind of guys were getting easy passes, and Curry was dishing those passes. I think too often we lose sight of how good of a passer Steph Curry really is.
He's technically a point guard.
Yes, and that's the thing is when he came out of college, one of the big knocks on him was that he was going to be an undersized shooting guard. Well, he said, okay, fine, I'm going to tighten up my handle, and he always had the vision, but his handle wasn't tight enough for him to really show that passing ability early in his career. But he tightened up his handle, became more of a point guard, and then the passing became there because of how crazy his court vision is. And I think you saw that a lot in game 2. His passing was extremely impressive. I thought it was the most impressive part about his game, too, even more so than his shooting. That's why I think you're seeing some NBA people really, kind of freak out about how good Steph Curry's been playing for these first 2 games, because you saw the shooting in game 1, and then game 2, you saw the passing, you saw the off-ball defense. So he's putting together a complete game through these first 2 games, and that's been a big part of it. His passing to counteract the Celtics' change on defense has been huge. So the question is now, they've stopped giving him those easy shots they did in game 1, but now can the Celtics tighten up the backside of the defense, get that rotation back to what it was in the regular season, or hell, the majority of the playoffs, and take away that secondary aspect and force the Warriors to come up with a third counter? I have a feeling that Udoka has that in him. The problem is, though, is that the Warriors keep showing that they have the counters for everything the Celtics have right now. So again, are the Celtics able to take that away? And when they do take that away, does it open up a third option? Maybe this is the kind of play we see open up Klay Thompson, where they take away the threes from Steph, they take away the easy stuff on the backside, but now we got a weak side Klay Thompson, and you're having to sag off him to take away those 2 things, and now Klay Thompson has that big game where he hits 7 of 9 3-pointers or something like that crazy.
I'm glad you brought up Klay Thompson. With an extra day between games, we and our media brethren are desperately trying to make up story. No, that's not fair. Find stories.
Yes,
Find
yes. There you
stories.
go. There you go.
That's more fair. And you know what? I'll bite. I read them all too. I'll bite on it. There seems to be a lot of hand wringing and teeth gnashing about Klay Thompson. Is he done? Can he get back? Is he toast for the series? How do you feel about Klay and where his game is right now and how it plays for the rest of these finals?
I mean, I think it's clear that his defense isn't what it used to be, and I think it's clear that his explosion as a ball handler on offense isn't what it used to be. I mean, it's too. I mean, he's getting bottled up on every drive. Essentially, I mean, he doesn't have the first step that really forces defense to bend and change and those kind of things. He cannot get past the majority of wing defenders right now in that first step. So that penetration isn't there. The driving kick game isn't there for him. He's strong and he's long, but he was always going to be that kind of guy where as soon as he lost that first step, his game was going to go from being fairly well rounded to pretty much being a shooter in a spot up guy, because that just part isn't there. And here's the thing. It's one of those things where with that kind of injury and not playing in a game for almost 900 days the way it went for Klay Thompson, this could be something that's completely different in 6 months when he really gets used to he really gets used to it and the confidence comes back. We don't know where he's at in his head when it comes to these kind of injuries, but right now it's just not there, and so he's not changing the defense of the Celtics enough, and so that's why I think if he has a big game, it's because there's enough movement and countering around him that he then gets open. And that's, I'm sure, something the Warriors are going for. Like I said, Klay's had a 30-point game every single series. And the reason why it's only been one, the reason why there haven't been that many other 25-point games, is because I really think what we've seen series is Klay Thompson finding a game where the other machinations of the Warriors finally open him up and then he explodes. And I think, again, that's where we'll see him go against this team, because Grant Williams, Marcus Smart, Derek White, I mean, these are guys that aren't going to get beat by Klay right now. But again, in this Warrior system, he's always liable to just get open and just completely just destroy everything. And again, his confidence is a little bit racked right now. He was talking about it earlier today. He was saying how when he has bad runs of confidence, he goes onto YouTube and watches his old big games to try to kind of get that confidence. Like, I can do it again. That tells me that there is something mental to where his game's at right now. If it's really the act of him getting the confidence of saying, no, that's old Klay. That's what I used to be able to do. Specifically, he says he always watches Game 6 Klay when he went incandescent against the Thunder. That tells me there's a mental side there, and he's working through that.
You know what that is? That's the baseball player in him. That's what a baseball player does when they're in a slump. They go back and look. People may not remember Klay was a great baseball player.
Yeah.
And that's the baseball player in him going back. I love that. That's good stuff.
And also, you have to think about being a driver and not just being a shooter. That was the biggest hurdle in Klay Thompson's young career. His dad, Michael Thompson, the Laker great, also an NBA broadcaster, used to say on Warriors broadcasts, he used to call them Klay-ups because he didn't understand how his 6'7" son would go up like a 16-year-old who was 5'10". He would attack the rim with just complete passivity. He'd go up with his back turned because he didn't want to take the contact. He'd go up, weak with the ball. And as soon as he changed it, he tightened his dribble and he started going up strong. It's like, oh yeah, you're 6'7" and you're a great athlete. You're going to beat people all the time to the rim. And then he became the Klay Thompson who was scoring 27 points per game and those kind of things. And so this was his biggest hurdle, becoming that kind of player. And it's not surprising to see this being the biggest hurdle again after the injuries.
And you touched on it when we first started talking about Klay, about his defense. Will his defense be more significant to this series than his offense?
It would, if this was a slightly different Celtics team, I would say yes. But my biggest thing with the Celtics right now is, and I think it's showing this, is that they're not consistently taxing the Warriors' defense enough. The Warriors' defense, again, I said it before, and I think it proved out in Game 1. And for parts of Game 2, the Celtics, when they lock in, are a slight tier above the Warriors defensively. But the Warriors are still a great defense. And guys like Grant Williams, guys like Derek White, Um, they're not testing, the seams of the Warriors defense in the same way that the Warriors are doing to the Celtics. And I just don't think a guy like Clay has been exposed yet. I mean, again, I think there were a lot of times in game two where, again, Nemanja Bjelica, very solid player, but he's a great offensive player and he struggles defensively. There was a lot of times where they were putting Bjelica in switches on Tatum, and then Tatum was pulling up from 17 feet. Dude, you have to murder that guy. You have to absolutely put Bjelica on a poster every single time they give you that possession. The Celtics lost game two on the margins. And there were so many stupid possessions where they failed to get a good shot, and they simply failed to put their foot on the neck. I mean, they could have conceivably pushed it to about a 12 or 14 point lead at times in the second quarter of that game, but they would fart around for 2 or 3 possessions in a row, and the Warriors would then get 2 threes because that's what the Warriors freaking do. And also, and it's a game again, the Warriors are up too. It was no execution in the first half to finally put that game away. And so, and that's the thing is, like, they're not attacking those moments. Klay Thompson on switches, they haven't got it a lot. It surprised me how little Klay Thompson's ended up on Jayson Tatum. And so maybe that's a matchup that the Warriors would be more positive in. Maybe that's one that Tatum would be able to kind of attack. But right now, again, I go back to kind of my first point. You bring it up again. Tatum's got to kill those same moves. I said it after game one. I would have said similar things to Peyton Pritchard minutes and the Warriors' failure to consistently attack those in game one, why they kind of let that one slip away. But undoubtedly, game two, that was the big thing that stood out to me. Too many times did the Warriors give Tatum and the Celtics a chance, and they didn't take it. Right now, if you took the aggressiveness of Jaylen Brown and put that in Jayson Tatum's body, I think it's 2-0 Celtics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I really do not think that, either of those games were like, they ended up being blowouts, but I really think that it's crazy that those games were so much closer in so many different respects. I think obviously the Warriors letting game one slip away, very close, but I think you can pin down so many different moments in game two where the Celtics had that game and just let it slip away because they failed to execute in the same way. And so, back to your original question, I kind of diverted from the big question there, which was, can Klay Thompson be a defensive, factor? And right now I would say yes, because the Celtics aren't putting the pressure on the Warriors defense they need to. That could change tonight because a guy like Jaylen Brown or a guy like Tatum, they could expose that as a little bit of a weakness. We'll see. Another
figure that it's in some circles is polarizing. I wanted to get your thoughts on Draymond Green. He is an interesting cat. Talked to an NBA play-by-play guy this week, and he said in his mind, unequivocally, Draymond Green's an NBA Hall of Famer. He said without question, but without the kinds of numbers that we're used to seeing. Okay, I get that. What I think is interesting is how do you, when you're playing against him, how do you play it? Do you react toughness for toughness? Does it get you out of what you want to do? And in that case, he got you.
Yeah.
Or do you say, I'm not going to react, but you inadvertently go passive, in which case he got you. So how do you play against Draymond Green? I think the way he plays makes it so difficult for whoever he's up against on either end of the floor. It's a fascinating sort of mini theater going on.
Hey, you're about to be in Boston. You're about to be in Boston at TD Garden. Let him get himself suspended in this game. Listen, I love Draymond Green, and I love the way that he bothers people, and I've always been a huge fan of it. I will say though, not even in like the dirty hits, the elbows, the running over Grant Williams, and kind of being that kind of shit disturber. That's honestly not the things about Draymond Green that's honestly bothering me. Because honestly, game two, I hit a point where I understand why people who hate Draymond Green react the way they do. Game two was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the dirtiest game of screens I've ever seen in my entire life from one player.
Pretty brutal.
That was egregious. That was a send the tape to the league office and tell the refs to be watching for something. That was bad.
Ask Billiken fans about Draymond Green against the Billikens in the NCAA tournament. What is that, 11 years ago? We're still
Yeah.
bitter.
I mean, he's always been bad, but I mean, there were plays where he was just like lowering his shoulder and pushing his way through three different Celtics to clearing a spot for a shooter for the Warriors. I mean, it was the most egregious set of moving screens. And I know it's bad, it's something that never gets called in the NBA, but Draymond Green is taking advantage of it to a bad point and to a negative point where there has to be an emphasis tonight on those kind of things. Again, the stupid stuff that Draymond's going to get into, that's always going to happen. It's literally happened every single finals he's played in. A couple of times he's gotten suspended or kicked out of a game, and it's completely changed the finals in the past. We've seen that. So I mean, that's always liable to happen, but never to this point did I actually get to a point where I legitimately think you have to. This game, if he does that again, you have to call 3 or 4 offensive fouls on him because it is giving the Warriors a completely bullshit advantage in their style of game. It's so incredibly like slanted towards them in that way. Listen, moving screens, I understand fine, but literally walking a player away from their, the ball handler,
Yeah.
just by like being like just going like this and lowering your shoulder, that's stupid. Okay, that's like, listen, I love football as much as the next guy, but they're different sports for a reason. We play them on different fields for a reason. That's ridiculous. They have to rein that in. I don't care. I do not. I mean, literally, knee a guy in the balls again before you do that for an entire game, man. That was dumb and completely took me out of the game at times. And honestly, for the first time ever, which is shocking to say, I honestly hit a threshold where I was getting a little sick of Draymond.
And that's really interesting. And think about if you're the guy that either has to guard him or he's guarding you, and think about the line you have to walk where he's not in your head. And the fact that you got to think about that line means he's already in your head.
Yep. And again, that's the thing is like I can respect a guy who's getting in your head with with hard plays, a little shit talking and stuff like that. But I think this is a level where it's kind of like it kind of hit like bully in the schoolyard who's too good at getting he's always able to get you when the teacher's not watching, and as soon as you retaliate, like he's getting too good at this. And I'm a little bit like observer from the other classroom, like, okay, we got to get this kid. This is bothering me. I'm not even involved necessarily. I'm a third party observer, but this little shit just can't keep letting this stuff roll. And that's, I mean, it's just, there's got to, again, I love him to a point. I've always been a huge fan of him. I've always talked about him. I'm one of the first people to agree in the fact that he's a Hall of Famer, but I don't want to see another, I don't want to see them winning another finals game just because he continues to get away with that. Blow the whistle on him, rein it in a little bit. And also, if you're the Celtics, it is a little bit up to you. If you're Grant Williams, and Draymond Green just like leaning on you, you got to do like the old thing where you just like step out of the way and like watch him fall or something like that. And maybe like get some kind of like find a way to accentuate the fact that Draymond Green is essentially doing a reverse flop. Like that's essentially what he's doing. He's reverse flopping. Flop. And I don't know how you call that. I mean, it's an offensive foul. It's an illegal screen. I know exactly what you call it, but that's essentially what it is. And that they got to, maybe it's just standing really tall and forcing it to be Draymond Green is going to have to completely knock you over. And, that's kind of like a sacrifice your body for the moment kind of play. Maybe that's what we need. But somebody's got to do something, whether it's the Celtics or the referees. That cannot go on in Game 3.
It cannot stand.
This aggression will not stand.
So I think we're about that time. We're feeling pretty good after we got a game right. So what do you think about Game 3 back in Boston?
I think this one. I think Boston's going to win this one before I think things kind of maybe shift back up in Game 4 and they kind of lose that home field advantage they stole away from the Warriors. But I think Game 3, I'm going to give it to Boston. I just think right now, after that comeback in Game 2 or comeback in Game 1, in a Game 2 where they just really didn't play their game and they know it. You combine little parts of that. You combine Jaylen Brown having a better shooting game, Derek White continuing to be being able to score on the Warriors' second team, Tatum having the games he's had as a passer and a scorer, maybe able to bring a kind of a middle ground between those two things. I think, and then also you're going to be at home. I think they're going to call it a little bit closer. I think Draymond's not going to be able to get away with that stuff as much in Game 3. So I'm giving the Celtics Game 3. It's going to be extremely close. Something tells me we see the Warriors kind of shock everybody, jump out to an early lead in the first half, and then again we'll just see another second half that has no relation to the first half of the game or any of the games we've seen prior.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Brown will have a big game, and I think Tatum will have the monster game he needs to have. Now, and I know what people say, oh, if you want to be great, you got to do it every night and all those kinds of things. I think he'll have a monster game. It's not realistic at this point in his career to expect 40-something every night, but I think he will in game 3. And then I still want to keep an eye on Klay Thompson and see if we can pick out details and nuance that may be predictors for the rest of the season, because he could be a tipping point player.
Yeah, I like that call. One other thing I wanted to mention before we go, somebody pointed this out to me, and I think this is fascinating, Rammer. This entire run of the playoffs, we've talked a lot about there being a bunch of crazy big blowouts and things like that. Every series has had multiple blowouts. There's been one sweep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that is insane to me. The only sweep was Boston over Brooklyn in the first round. Everything else, the other team won at least one game. Obviously, we're not going to have a sweep now in the NBA Finals. So all of these blowouts, including the NBA Finals, starting with 2 20-point games, despite them being very close at times early, or not 2 20-point games, but a 20-point game, and then one that the Celtics kind of extended there in game 1. So even so, 2 games that aren't that close on the final score, and yet an entire run of playoffs where we've had a bunch of upsets, and yet only one actual sweep. It's been crazy. Again, I think it's the reason why we've seen that is a reason why we're going to see another couple switches here in the finals. Coaching has mattered more than ever in the NBA, and I love that.
Well, and then late runs. By late, I mean, late third quarter into the fourth quarter, mid second half runs seem like they have kind of dictated the finish. And I would never suggest in the playoffs that somebody concedes or gives up, but hitting a team with a combination late, and it just sends them reeling, and they can't recover, even with a handful of minutes remaining.
Okay, the good teams make adjustments in the second half. That's the biggest thing, I think. Good. That halftime is starting to become something meaningful in these games. I mean, teams consistently look completely different after the half than they did before. The pre-half, the coach interviews right before he goes back on the sidelines, probably still useless, but potentially maybe more information inducing than any time other in NBA history, because I really just think the coaching matters. And I think this is a great example of it. Just keep watching how these things change. The Warriors are not going to look anywhere near, schematically what they did in games 1 or 2. And who knows, it might completely switch it, or we might get the same thing we saw in game 1.
I think we both have the Celtics. My one caveat is if the Celtics don't pay enough attention to Thompson, could Klay go off where we're not really expecting it? Could he do that and tip the scales? That would be my only caveat to game 3, but I'm picking the Celtics just like you are.
And also, I just saw we got a comment here on the broadcast. They're asking about the Robert Williams III. Last thing I saw, he is still questionable for tonight. Home game 3 of the finals. Something tells me that he's going to be playing tonight. But last thing I saw, he was still listed as questionable.
Yeah, I think he'll find a way.
I think so. He's listen. Daniel Tice surprised me, but they need Robert Williams to make that defense work.
We'll talk to everybody again at the end of the week and figure out what's going on in this series. And can we get lucky? Can we pick 2 of the first 3 games? Yeah, I don't like our chances. But I like the Celtics tomorrow night. Rocc, thanks very much, buddy. We'll talk later in the week.
Thanks, Graham. We'll see you later.
That's Matt Rocc. I'm Bob Ramsey. Thanks for joining us on Two Man Game.
From our roots in St. Louis, Royal Banks of Missouri is branching out to continue serving you with our locations in St. Charles, Jerseyville, Granite City, and now in Hannibal, Center, and New London. Royal Banks of Missouri, the community bank in your community.
At St. Louis Acura, new inventory is arriving daily, both new and pre-owned. Our buying team adds a higher level of personalized service that others can't match. We sell over 100 pre-owned vehicles monthly, and many of these are matched by our buying teams in Missouri and Illinois. As new Acura production ramps up, be one of the lucky ones to try the newest Type S models now available. Performance has never been so stylish and comfortable. St. Louis Acura remains committed to becoming better than ever for you.